Have the non-agenda items and visitors. The Finance Committee allocates 15 minutes at this time for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the committee on any matter that is not listed on the agenda. I don't see anyone in the room. Do we have anyone listening online who might like to participate?
No, ma'am.
Okay, on to the business discussion. First item is the review of the water operating budget and rate analysis. And Bettina, do you want to tee us off with a presentation of a review of your memo?
Sure. It's more of a continuation. We actually started reviewing last meeting, and not much has changed other than there's a narrative attached to it. Attachment A went through the revenues and expenses with 25% of operating expenses plus 2 years of depreciation. And one scenario's got a flat water rate, and two scenarios reflect an increase, one being a 2.5% increase, and the other one a 3% for 3 years, and then flat for the rest thereafter. Obviously, the first one, no rate increase. You'll see cash balances and net position change and basically go in the negative as the years progress out to 2030. And then the the increases of 2.5% and 3% show an increase. The more steady one obviously is a 2.5% with, increase across the years.
I had a question in looking at this graph right here on attachment A.
Yep.
There is a thicker red line that goes just below the green change in unrestricted net assets, and
Oh, and
it
it's not
wasn't
showing in the
legend.
chart.
Pardon?
It's not showing in the legend, huh?
Yeah. So I just wanted a little clarification on that one.
Can I share my screen, Drew?
Sure.
You may. Let me stop. Tina, you're not plugged into the podium, are you?
No.
Good. Okay.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I needed to be.
No.
No. So yeah, that cutoff, my apologies.
Oh.
It's the change in unrestricted with the 3 years at 3%. And then the dotted one is the no rate change that goes beneath the reserve balance requirements. And then the blue is the target reserve, and the green is with the 2%, 2.5% steady across the years.
Got it.
One difference in this chart from prior years is incorporated into the charts is a $500,000 capital investment rather than the $400,000 that we'd used in prior years. I was able to load this data and work with the software company that I showed you briefly to, and we actually used an incremental inflationary rate to that $500,000. Took it out even a little further. So in those charts online, the number is actually a little lower as you get to the out years because we incrementally increased it for inflationary purposes, just to be a little bit more realistic. But obviously each year, every 2 years, we review this so as to avoid that number decreasing.
So we're always kind of
We're on top
adjusting
of it.
as we move along.
Right, for sure.
Right.
One might want to take away from this chart that, a 2.5% number is a good number for an annual increase, depending on what the capital projects are and, what the expenses and water usage ends up being for the year before.
Just in terms of what predicted interest rates and, CPI and all that, it's really interesting that, we've kind of maxed out, we're going to start ticking down, and then, now we're heading back up again, and it really is, it's a constantly moving target.
Right, and in the projections on the sheets that were included, we've included the CLC Jawa rates per their 22 budget numbers, and I think that they're looking at some extra bond issuances to do some infrastructure work sooner than what we originally anticipated, so those rates will probably change and go up faster than what was originally tracked on the sheets, so that'll affect the decisions as well.
And in terms of CLC Jawa membership, over the years that I've been here, there's been some, additions, but at this present time, there's no real expected change to membership.
I don't believe so, Drew. Are there any additions that are on the horizon for CLC Jawa?
Jeff?
Cue
well,
Jeff, it's like a play.
He's, oh,
Jeff,
there you
just
are.
miraculous
Oh,
things.
he's in the house.
Jeff is in the house.
There is some talk, I think, with Lake Zurich at this time.
Yeah.
They've been discussing most seriously. So that is out there. I think they're just waiting for Lake Zurich to say they want in or not.
Okay, but if that were to happen, I mean, are we close to the present existing infrastructure where we'd really have to invest
It
in?
would be several years away before they could
Yeah.
get water out there.
Okay.
Their main reason they're talking about pushing rates up is everything is 30 years old plus
Yeah.
now. So things that were built new with the plant are kind of failing in different ways that they anticipated.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you. That's just one of the many variables that, you know, the further we look out, the more difficult it gets to kind of nail that down. Thank you.
Bettina, do you mind showing the previous chart, the one that just shows Jawa's rates in the historical?
Sure. So, sorry, my screen's a little different on my computer. Oh, this is, why am I not moving? Oh,
Yeah, and if you, I can ask a direct question if it's hard to find too.
no, it's on here, it's just, I need to get the right, there we go. So this pink line is the
Oh.
projected rates per their FY '22 budget.
Right, okay, actually, that'll answer my question. So rates have gone down, right?
Yeah, oh,
And
yes.
that has been terrific, and they are expected, and what are these based on, those expectations?
So they paid off their bond debt right around 21 here, when you see the drop from 229 to 163,
Okay,
and lowered their rates accordingly. And slowly they've increased due to inflation and other, internal costs, but now they're talking about potentially new bond debt. So that would bring us back to,
Okay, so new
some
bond debt.
earlier levels over here.
in 2025 or 26, and that would be for infrastructure?
Right.
Assumingly, okay.
Yeah, Jeff, if I can say his name, maybe he reappear again. It's like a genie.
Stage
Is he coming? Yeah. Jeff, could you please talk to the Finance Committee about Jawa's, they had originally talked about keeping those rates lower for a longer period of time, but it had to change a heart on that, largely regarding certain infrastructure that they had put in the ground many moons ago, right? Their
So
RCP.
Jawa
Yeah.
finished their original bonds off like a year ago or so.
Yeah.
And they dropped their rate about 50, 60 cents per 1,000 gallons, which for us is significant. Their plan at that point was to keep them low, but as they're discovering, it's not just even pipes in the ground, it's more stuff in the plant right now, and even in the pump station that's needing replacement earlier than anticipated. So they've gone back through their entire roster of equipment and kind of pushed forward some of the replacement dates. There's also a push to put in some duplicate infrastructure in critical areas where if it failed, it would
Got redundancy.
take 3 weeks to fix, such as under the tollway, which could be a problem. We found out a year or so ago, we always thought we would be fine in Lake Bluff because we're right across the street, but I guess they can't turn the plant down far enough to just feed us, so when they had a problem, they actually cut us off too for a week. It was about a year and a half ago. So there is probably $30 million worth of identified stuff where
Wow.
we'd like to do parallel pipes, but I don't know that that's imminent. More, it seems like the mechanical items are coming up more quickly, and that's what they're focusing on.
And they at a high level have explored other redundancies, including a different plant, but have struggled, given the proximity to Lake Michigan, that all the raw water sources are coming from the same
Right.
body of water. And
Right.
that's a little difficult in close proximity. So but they've looked at that. as
They've
well.
looked at interconnecting with other Jawas and other systems and how far that would take. I was on a committee that studied that a couple of years ago. Turned out that's all very expensive and they can't necessarily feed what Jawa would need, so it'd be complicated and expensive. But these smaller parallel pipes, or they've also looked at putting more storage out west to try to, have some redundancy by if there's a break somewhere further east, they can still feed people out west. But that's all, like I said, very, very expensive. You talk about running pipes for 8-10 miles, and without having a new customer to kind of make that worth it, it's hard to put that in the budget and raise the rate accordingly.
Right. So again, the rate would be a direct feed from what Jawa predicts, not our version of what we think Jawa will do. I mean, Jawa projects out their rates, right? Right.
Jawa has given a couple different scenarios. One in which they spend some more on equipment, one in which they take some debt, I believe, and there was a third, which I can't quite recall exactly what that was, but it was how they would fund different things, maybe spending down some reserves and some other accounts. But they're all within a dime, I think, of each other
Okay.
in the next few years, so it's not all that impactful.
Okay. I just wanted to know if the version that we're using of these rates is in the middle, a more conservative rate, or, you know,
Yeah, and they're usually very conservative with their water sales forecast, which is how they kind of back into their rate as well. So I think it is a fairly conservative number they have there. There's a lot of pressure, obviously, to keep rates down because many communities, when they paid off their bonds, were counting on that lowering like we were to then use that extra income to do some infrastructure improvements. So there's
Right.
not a lot of push for them to raise rates amongst the members right now.
right, right. One other question relating to this projection, and I don't have the formulas to know exactly how much this would matter, probably very little, but in the 2.5% rate increase version compared to the one that didn't have a rate increase, the actual number for FY 21-22 was put in there, but in the rate increase versions, it was just a rounded water sale number. But I don't know, just looking at the formula, if that would, it's not a big difference, and I didn't know if it would really change much in terms of the calculations.
So you mean this
So-
number, the 18 million?
It would be the actual FY 21-22, it says 19, compared to, no, it is 190,000 million gallons
So this,
versus.
this
100
19,3,854 versus this estimated,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think that really changes too much in the calculations, but I didn't have the formulas. And I was gonna ask you about it before the meeting, and I
So
wrote
this,
my note, and
yeah,
I
this
forgot.
isn't a formula, it's actually going back to our sales data from that period and putting the number in there. So, I mean, I can,
It's an actual number tying to what we
yeah,
purchased.
I can't, I mean, I'd have to click back and forth, but I don't think it would have a big impact on
Yeah.
what we're looking at there, no.
I just wanted to mention that, and I'm sorry I
No, thank you.
didn't say anything before the meeting.
Do you mind scrolling down to 29 and 30, the bond, principal and interest?
On this tab, without?
Yeah, there you go.
Without the increase, or what?
Yeah, so can you just remind me how much of a bond we took out and how long it lasts?
So it was just about 1.9 million, and it's 15 years.
And when does it mature, roughly?
We took it out 2 years ago, so we have about 13 years left.
Okay. And it looks, is it a variable rate bond? Because it looks like the principal and interest are changing.
So initially, it changed, it is somewhat variable, yes. Initially, it changed because we had some of another debt that we were paying off, so there was more interest, less principal, and then we backed into, because we wanted to be consistent with approximate number, instead of having a payment that fluctuated that much. So initially, the first few years, it was calculated a little differently, because we were paying off one series of debt and adding on another. Remember, we did a
Trying to
refunding,
think,
yeah.
We'd show it in the,
You might
yeah,
find the bond chart. Okay.
it was relatively flat, though.
Yeah,
That was the
Okay.
goal. It wasn't 100% flat.
no.
It looks like it has a big jump out in the out years, in 27 and 28. The principal goes from 155 to 210. Yeah, we don't need to get, that could be a follow-up. We don't need to get that. in the
Okay.
minutes. It's all within a
I'll pull
reasonable
it and let
range.
you
But
know.
I don't have any other questions.
Well, so, I mean, we're looking at kind of 3 discussion options, which would be no change in rate, 2.5% change, and a 3%. And 2.5 is kind of the sweet spot that in all the graphs, things kind of look where we would be comfortable and happy. And so, I don't know, we don't need to belabor a discussion that is kind of pointing to a 2.5% increase. We don't want to pad the numbers, we don't want to be insufficient in the rates, so.
And we can change going forward, even though what we've done is project 2.5 in the out years. We're not bound by that.
Right, what we're doing is we're just saying, next year, what do we think we're gonna be, so,
Right,
right?
Right.
right.
Okay, so do we have a motion then to,
Adopt a 2.5% increase. I'll move, so move.
I'll second that.
okay, is this all in favor?
It would, yeah, it's just a recommendation to the village board.
Okay.
Yeah, so voice vote.
We are all in favor of recommending to the village board the 2.5%. Got it.
Signal by saying aye, right?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Next is a review of the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund. So,
VERF.
VERF, and the VERF during the pandemic was not funded as it had been in prior years because we wanted to be maintaining our cash balances and being nimble to handle whatever would come our way. And now we're kind of post-pandemic and
Right.
looking at what's our new normal. And Bettina, did you want to just kind of go through the background of what we're presenting for the budget considerations?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me get there. So as Chair Inkerman said, in 2021, we took the contributions down to zero. There were no contributions from the general fund to the replacement fund, and purchases were limited to squad car, and technology purchases were also restricted. And then we start up again with a half fee, prorated contributions from the general fund, and then this year, they were a whole, budgeted for a whole contribution of the 392. And then I'm sorry, 428. And then in the out year, fiscal year 24, we have budgeted a number of 392. That's related to the purchases that are listed on the memo. So technology and infrastructure, technology purchases, which normally are part of the personal computer replacement schedule, and varying other network administrator and reliability security improvements, pretty typical for the fund, and also the 2 squad car purchases. The 2 items that are different than normal, if you will, are the street truck, which is a repair to the steel bed of the dump truck, and also a repair to the fire truck vehicle, which is new water tank to be put in the back, rather than repurchasing the new vehicles just to extend the life cycle. But, so these are not full new vehicles, they're equipment repairs, more or less. And that's really all that's going on in the replacement fund for this year. As you look at the charts that were included, the biggest change to the chart from prior years is we removed the replacement of a large fire department truck, and that changed the contributions, which I leveled out in the out years to about 350 instead of 428, and also reduces the expenditures in those years. There was a big $1 million expense sitting out here in 25 in prior years that we've chosen not to replace.
And the reason that green line goes down so precipitously is there are some big repairs in 25 and 29.
The blue line?
The fund balance.
Oh, the fund balance, yes. We're spending, according to the schedule of replacement costs and
Okay.
the years that they're due to be replaced, they're scheduled for purchase, yes. It could change from year to year. We tend to extend or do other things with those vehicles to extend the life of them. So it varies from year to year, but as they sit on their chart right now, that's what it will look like.
So we see predicted revenue to be, steady. We show expenses in the out years, as as needed by the specific departments, and overall, the fund balance appears to be healthy.
Right. And this too is another one similar to the water fund. As we progress towards those years and other purchases or needs arise, we adjust, the contributions or what's being purchased to what the fund balances are, so.
And
It's
by
somewhat fluid.
department, each department, based on what their specific needs are, then their contribution would change.
Yeah, actually, I didn't include that, but there's a large spreadsheet that lists out every vehicle that's allocated to each department and calculates the life cycle and the term and the value and escalates per inflation, and then tallies that all up and allocates out what the contribution is per department within the general fund.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments regarding the schedules?
It all checks out to me.
Okay. So, in terms of the, budget, we're happy with what we're including in the budget. We understand the potential capital outlay, and there's always timing differences and, things that come up, but, we feel comfortable recommending this for the next budget cycle. And do we need to?
Yeah, I think that's, at this point, there's no other relevant pieces to forward. You guys can recommend the budget as drafted.
Do we have a motion to recommend this as drafted?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's look at the last agenda item.
So typically with the budget, what happens?
Oh, wait.
No, we provide, we look at the update, we look to update our pay plan based off market conditions. We also, as well as internal equity and so forth. This is a work in progress. We haven't had the best response from agencies we seek data from, so unfortunately, it's not ready for prime time.
Okay.
But we want to give you an idea, a flavor where this is headed, at least what we've seen so far from the data, and we'll bring it back to you. I guess you guys can choose how far, if you want to see it again or just simply bring it to the board. The other missing piece of this is we also do a personnel manual update at this point based off conversations with our risk management pool and our so with legal counsel, right now, we only think there's one new act. Oh, I'm sorry,
One new act, but there's two things. Do you want me to review in the pay plan?
Sure,
I
I'm just,
gave
this is
it
a
to-
high level, so there's
Okay.
two things what you're gonna see, but again, this is, we'll talk you kind of through them, and you can decide, you know what, we'll be comfortable just going straight to the board with that. So,
Okay.
Bettina?
So in the past, I didn't, it's rough, so I didn't hand this out yet, but we review all the pay grades insofar as the minimums and maximums that are allowed or based on where we fall in the ranking of 12 other communities. So far, what I've determined is that there is, we end up in the mid-range between 5 and 7 or 9, depending on the position. So that's kind of where we want to be as far as rankings is concerned.
Out of about 10 to 12.
At about 10 to 12 communities.
Yeah.
And then I look at those ranges and confirm that nobody's salary would exceed that range for the coming years. And that is not the case. So there's no need to make a change to any of the salary grades for this fiscal year. The thing that I was looking at, which is in the draft of the pay plan that I just gave you, on page, bless you, on page 5, there's a section that talks about additional duty pay. And this section is very antiquated. We're not really positive where some of the numbers and how the theory or concept behind it came from. So we're looking to change that because it doesn't give us a lot of flexibility in assigning someone else extra duty pay for working in another department or doing something outside of their normal scope of work. This, in a nutshell, says you have to work 40% of your time represented in an off-duty, extra duty assignment, and it can only be $130 per pay period. So there's nothing that we would do that would qualify 40% of someone's time in another department and only pay them $130. So we're looking at just kind of revamp that so that we can
That's
potentially utilize that.
40% overtime.
Right, yeah,
So
and only get $130
We went back
for it.
and without
Yeah.
spending an enormous amount of resources on the research, but we were like, where did this come from? What are the origins? Because it's so specific, it's so prescriptive, and it's like, is this,
Reads like.
Is it from the 20s, when 120
Right.
was?
is it,
It's-
yeah, but it's,
You
we
need
have
words.
CBAs now, so what, so where did this come from? Is it, FSLAs? It's, it seemed bizarre, like or some other act, we didn't know, but so we did do a quick check with our risk management agency, which has employment litigation, they have understanding of all those regulations, and they were like, never heard of it, sounds really hyper-local. And so, but we don't know where it came from and tried to figure it out, but at this point, we may have the potential to take advantage of existing human capital. The idea that some people have some skills that we may be able to put to work in other places and wouldn't necessarily want to be, tethered to something that didn't make sense in the
Right.
contemporary employment universe.
Right.
Yeah.
And the wording of that wouldn't even really permit us to do what we'd want to do because there's not 40% of anyone's time that's going to be reallocated. So looking to, that would come back with a different language. And then page 6, the only change to actual rates, which doesn't fall into full-time rates at all, would be the part-time temporary positions. We have the clerical and intern and secretarial hourly rates capping out at $21.25 an hour. And that's actually where some of our current part-timers sit. So it's hard to give them any sort of merit or increase. So we're looking to change those rates as well, probably bring them in sync with the building line. So you'll see that come back too. And that's really it for the pay plan, other than, well, we're not gonna do the 40-hour extra
Paid leave act?
paid leave act that's coming out. That would be next time around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are kind of where we're coming from, but again, we're still waiting on some comps. I shouldn't say comps, on some other communities to give us back their data. So,
Right.
any heartburn from any of that approach or?
No.
Okay, well, thank you for that update.
Let me clarify. So then, is there comfortable enough that you guys would just rather have that just come straight to the village board as part of the overall? It would come back in April? Yes, okay. All right, easy
That sounds
enough.
great. Okay. It looks like we're at the end of our agenda, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.
Oh, that's a record.
That is a record.
You're welcome to go home if you.
I've never done that, but I may
Come right back.
go home and see my daughter real quick.
Okay.
So I'm gonna hit